Howdy, good morning. Flash, wake up, Flash. All right, AP Human Geography. We've been talking about urban geography and cities and urban life, and what we want to do this week is build on that. Last week we took a look at Bennington and the Bennington area, see what's been going on in the Bennington thing. Last week on Thursday and Friday we talked about annexation. Will Omaha ever annex Bennington? And we talked about it's not a fast demand for Omaha to do so because, like we talked about, Omaha wants to annex to get sales tax dollars. So business areas that generate revenue for the city through sales tax are going to be much more appealing for Omaha to annex than, say, urban areas. And then on Friday, I told you to take a look at the Bennington area, take a look at some of the developments around Bennington and the housing area. And if you drive 168th Street out towards Anchor Point, you see what I'm talking about. They're building on both sides of the road. And there's still growth in Bennington School District, but mostly it's going to be more of that type of growth with the housing developments of Omaha going west or the rise of suburbia. Well, let's take a look at that a little bit more today. Today I want to ask a couple things for you to think about, and then I've got a couple articles that I'll put on the classroom for you to read about this, okay? So we live out in West Omaha, suburbia. Have you ever driven on 4th Street at rush hour? State Street coming back from Omaha at rush hour? 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock on State Street? How about on Dodge Street, the Dodge Street Expressway, or the interstate? The one problem with suburbia is transportation. The suburban dream is to live out. You're not in the city. You're not confined. You have a yard. Your kids can go outside and play, some grass, a tree, or something like that. And then we put little fences around our yard. It's our own little kingdoms, you know what I mean? So we do that. But suburbia is where you have a little bit more room, where you can have a family, a house, some area, a yard, back deck or whatever. That's the dream of suburbia, having a little bit more room, being out away from the noise of the city, the crime of the city, the sound. A lot of times I'll sit out in front of my house on my swing and just in the evening it's really nice. There's not a lot of traffic on 156th Street. It sounds nicer. So that's what suburbia is. But there are some problems with suburbia. Transportation is what makes suburbia possible. People can live out here in Anchor Point, Stratford Park, wherever, and they can go work down at Mutual of Omaha. They can work at First National. They can work at downtown with the Union Pacific. But that's the problem. You've got to get from suburbia down to where the jobs are. Okay. If you're talking about the Med Center, that's a little bit of a drive from us. And you're not just going to get on an interstate and hop off and be at the Med Center. You're going to have to take feeder streets, as they're called, and you're going to have to fight traffic. The idea of living in suburbia is that you're away from the city. You're connected to the city, but you're not in it. But the problems of suburbia are, as the city keeps sprawling and you get further and further out in the suburbs, it gets harder to get into the city. Transportation becomes a big issue. And there's a problem where it can get too big and the suburbs can sprawl. If your city doesn't build the infrastructure around it, the main streets to go out there, then you have a problem. Now, Maple Street, 2 lanes both ways. State Street, no. 4th Street, 156th Street for years wasn't. And so in our area, what they've done is they've let the growth come out to suburbia, and then later on they've been trying to go ahead and build the streets that will support it, which means, so if you know right now, there's a lot of construction on 156th Street over by Blondo. Well, there's a lot of traffic along that street every day. And a problem is, if you've got too much of a suburban growth too fast, you've got a problem. So your parents, if they work in Omaha and they live in Bennington, how do they get to work? Do you ask them? Talk to your parents and ask them, how do you get to work? What streets do you take? How long does it take you? Is it taking less or shorter? I mean, is it a longer time or a shorter time? It's an interesting one. One of the articles that I'm going to have you read, it'll be on Classroom, is that Omaha is trying to set up a little bit more of a mass transit thing to get people from the west downtown. They're going to be called rapid transit buses. And in the article, you'll see it's basically like 2 buses kind of accordion together in the middle that can get more people on the buses. And then the buses will pick people up like at Village Point and like West Roads and Crossroads, and they'll go down to downtown. They will not stop at every intersection, every block, everyone's waiting. It's like getting people from out west way downtown as fast as they can. But they're still using city streets. They'll be using Dodge Street, other streets like that. And that's a problem. Because again, if you've ever sat on Dodge Street coming west on 90th Street on that hill at rush hour, it's a long time. If there's ever snow or ice, forget about it. So it's a lot. But this is Omaha's attempt to change the transportation in Omaha. Now, other cities, if you go to Chicago, they've got an elevated train. New York has got the subway. If you've been to Washington, D.C., I'm talking about there, they've got subway too. So Omaha, though, doesn't have a transit system like that. So this rapid bus thing is what they're talking about. But it's hard to break our human habits. We like to get in the car, listen to our station, have our coffee in our coffee holder, and drive in. But as that drive gets longer and more frustrating, people start thinking about it. And so there's been a big question out there. Is suburbia always going to grow? And in some cities, the answer is no. There's a point where it's too far unless the infrastructure, the transportation, can support it. Omaha right now is trying to use some stopgap methods, like, again, this rapid transit bus thing, but it's not big enough, and that's just one route. You need to facilitate getting people in and out. In St. Louis, they put a light rail above and below, on the surface and below to get people to downtown St. Louis. If I go downtown, I go to St. Louis with my family to see a baseball game, I don't want to drive downtown St. Louis. It stinks. I'll get on the rail. But Omaha doesn't have a rail, and we don't have the money really to do that. But if you think about it, a lot of the stuff downtown Omaha, we've got our ballpark down there for the College World Series. Get the CHI Center down there. So you want to take in a big concert when this whole COVID thing is over, you got to go down there. But getting down there realistically every day for a job and other stuff, we just don't have the infrastructure for that. But anyhow, back to my point. A lot of people are saying that the suburbs are an old concept. About 10 years ago when I was teaching this, there was a movie out there called The End of Suburbia, and they thought that when gas prices got really high, that would not make it practical for people to live in the suburbs way out here. And when gas hit almost $4 a gallon, ask your parents about that, it looked like that might be true. But because there was such a high demand for gas and the gas prices were so high, we used technology to do stuff like fracking where we were able to get more gas from the ground. And gas prices today, if you drive around, you're paying under $2 a gallon. And under $2 a gallon, it's practical for people to live out here, get in their car, drive downtown. Places like LA and other places, that's not possible. But what is the future of the suburbs? There's been a kind of a trend, though. A lot of places, and like Omaha in particular, a lot of people are wanting to move back downtown. Right now in Omaha, the old market area is a huge area. There's a lot of condominiums down there, and if you know where the Bob Carey Bridge is, they built those things right next to it. But down in the old market itself, they've taken a bunch of old warehouses and turned those into condominiums, and then they built more condominiums down there. There's something called Midtown Crossing. We're going to talk about all this development in Omaha next week. So we're going to actually look at it. It's called New Urbanism, and we'll look at what it is. But I just want you to think about right now that the suburbs are not always necessarily going to be, and they're not always going to keep growing. That argument about 10 years ago was that eventually people would not want to move out to the suburbs anymore. And then eventually they would start moving back downtown. And that would take the suburbs and make them less desirable, and the prices would start to drop as the values. And people would stop moving to the suburbs. There were actually joggers thought that it might be like this, the future slums someday. A couple things to consider. A lot of the houses in the suburb, what quality are they? Are they what we call starter houses? Are these houses that in 20 years, since they're not built as well, will they be the same quality? That's the thing to consider. Okay. Will there be economic growth enough to sustain all those jobs? If we have a downturn, if we have a big recession, and people lose their jobs, they won't have the money to go out and buy those houses in the suburbs. Another thing to consider, the age group of the people that want to move out to the suburbs all too often are people that have younger kids. They like to raise their family. But what happens as they get older? Do they want to shovel the driveway and mow and everything like that? Some of the older suburbs in Omaha, which were on the edge of the city, have aged out. The people there don't have the kids as much. And ask people in the West Side District or other districts, they've got problems. Once upon a time, they were on the edge of city, and then the suburbs moved past them. And those people that want that dream of living on the edge of the city have to keep going out. What happens to those values? What happens to the neighborhoods as people keep moving out and you don't have those connections anymore anyhow? So there's a lot of questions about, are the suburbs sustainable? Here around Bennington, in the foreseeable future, there's going to be more growth. There's still a demand for houses at the edge of Omaha. Our economy is good. Omaha's a solid city. So they're going to build along State Street. I see the houses keep going out. Now, there's been trends. Between Military and Bennington on 156th Street, what you notice are all the big acreages. For a while in Douglas County, in our area, they wouldn't let you build a house unless you had at least 10 acres. They wanted big acres, okay? But now those big acreages, as the suburbs come out around Bennington, some of those big acreages kind of stifle. Like between Military and Omaha and Bennington, you've got those big acreages on both sides of the road. So it's kind of hard to develop, you know? And then just right on the other side, you're going to have like the heritage and stuff like that, a checkerboard type development. So with the suburbs, I bet you it keeps growing again. Omaha West along Maple Street. Between Maple Street and Dodge Street, that'll keep going. That's going to go west. I believe between like Ida Street and Maple Street, that's going to keep going west. Whether it's going to keep growing along Military, how fast is another issue. And that will a lot go to whether Bennington needs a second high school. All right, just some things to think about. Just remember, just because the suburbs are now doesn't mean that they will be in the future. As a good example, how malls, 20 years ago, malls seemed like the great thing. Build a mall. A lot of shops will go there and people will go there. Crossroads, Westroads. Hey, Oakview, let's build Oakview. Look at all these stores we could put in Oakview. But look at those same malls today. People don't want to go to malls today. Crossroads is dying. They've already announced they're going to close it and tear it out, basically. Westroads, hurting. Oakview, drive by Oakview, even before COVID, and look at their parking lot. They've lost their anchor stores, which we'll talk about also coming up in the future. So just because malls have always been doesn't mean they're going to be. The trend is away from malls. Ask Amazon. That's where they make their money. So suburbs. Right now, suburbs are strong around Omaha. One of the articles I'm going to have you read is about other areas where suburbs are not. And it's a case of people getting so far out that the system can't support it. So you're going to have an article about that and an article about the mass transit in Omaha to see if that's going to alleviate this and help allow that growth out west. The one thing is for sure, change is coming. But predicting it is tough. You look at the patterns of the past, but it's hard to tell what's coming up in the future. Who could have ever envisioned that COVID would close down America for a couple of months? We just didn't see it. All right, so there's some articles on Classroom. Take a look at them. See what you think about suburbs after you read those articles and the transportation which enable them, okay? And then think about Omaha area and Bennington, okay? Tomorrow we're going to talk about a guy named Chris Stoller, and he talked about where you have to have around the big metro area, you're going to have the bedroom communities and stuff like that. And we'll take a look at the model, and we'll show you how that explains Bennington, Arlington, Kennard, and Blair, and it kind of looks at the future of those things. And we'll talk about that tomorrow, too. All right, have a good week, and we'll see you later. Flash said bye. Okay, bye-bye, kids. Hope everything's going well for you. I miss you, I really do.